Once again, another deck profile, this time on the updated Rorowa deck, or in simply the Crossing Time Rorowa deck. Basically, Rorowa's ultimate form combined with Chronoscommand's power. And I have to say, I really loved the artwork when it was first introduced. Although, one thing that did scare me was the fact that it was going to replace the old Rorowas altogether. And that's exactly what happened. It completely, in technicality, was an alternative to the other form of Rorowas, instead of making use of all of them in one deck. But overall, I do actually like this new deck. It's a little bit more consistent, and because of this new form of Rorowa, we also got a new form of Momoke, because Cross Epic finally ended and Rorowa found the Regalis piece, or the Fire Regalis. And that's how we get this ultimate form of Rorowa. It's just too bad the other two previous forms of Rorowa is not being used here, because there's no point of using them, and I would have preferred if they actually combine all the other forms of Rorowa into one, like it would have been with Azel or the Cross, from V anyway. But anyway, the deck itself still runs very similar to the other previous forms of Rorowa, where you just call a bunch of plant tokens, but this time it's of course because of energy reasons. We now use energy instead of Counterblast or Soul Blast, which can be its own plus or minus depending on you, but in this case it's a plus since it's just an alternate resource that you're not really using, while also at the same time a bit enhanced as an alternative for a first grade 3 ride in comparison to the original Rorowa. Original Rorowa is kind of very weak, although you have a way to basically skip the evolution. If you do not skip the evolution, the deck is going to be very lackluster, and if you can't, it also kind of sucks as well. So with this one, you actually have more stuff to do on your grade 3 ride, along with a little more spacing. So there is a little bit of better flexibility with this deck overall in comparison to the previous forms of Rorowa, because you have to run 8 extra cards in the deck, whereas this one, you could take those 8 out and just have 3 instead. But with all that out of the way, let's just begin with the deck profile, and let's just go over the deck itself before we continue off. So first off, here's your starter. Still going to be this Rorowa, because Rorowa, and you have to use it for the ride line anyway. In which we go to the grade 1, where you call plant token to the back center column for free. Very nice. And then we go to grade 2 Rorowa, where 3,000 years pass, where you can retire one of your other rearguards to call 2 plant tokens. So grade 1 calls 1, so hopefully that doesn't get retired by any means. You retire that, so then you call 2 more plant tokens, in which that itself becomes like an early game attacker anyway, which is also pretty nice. In which now we go to Crossing into Interdimensional Thought Rorowa, the new ultimate form of Rorowa using Chronoscommand's power. So it has 3 skills. The first one is basically typical Rorowa, but a little enhanced, where when your opponent's Vanguard is at least at grade 3, all your token units get this ability. So first off, when your Vanguard is being attacked, you can retire it and then give the Vanguard plus 5k power. And all your token units also get plus 5k power. Here's a little bit of enhancement part. You still get the using tokens to basically guard your attacks, but they now get extra power in comparison to the original. The original does not give extra power, and so does the Vindent's Flash Rorowa. This one is a bit of enhancement on just the first grade 3 turn alone, hence why I am preferring this Rorowa a bit, because on first grade 3 ride it's already a little better. But there's also extra stuff with the next skills, with the second one of Energy Blasting 3 for once per turn to draw a card and call 2 plant tokens. So instead of just straight up calling 3 plant tokens, you're calling 2 instead and draw. This could actually be a little more helpful than you think, despite calling 1 less plant token, and that draw can actually be very important. Because something I do find with this deck sometimes is rearguard space. So if you're calling constantly too many plant tokens and you're not really retiring anything, because the whole point of this deck is calling the plant tokens and then using them for resources, you're going to end up having a board clogged up with plant tokens, and you just can't really do anything until you get rid of them. So having 1 less token isn't too bad, especially for this deck where it now actually uses less tokens as costs. So this part overall isn't exactly too bad. But the third skill is a new added skill that Rorowa has, and it's probably the part that references with Chronoscommand, where once per turn you can choose a glitter unit from your rearguard or soul and put it to the bottom of the deck. And then you perform one of the following abilities depending on what type of unit it is. So if it's a Rorowa unit, and that can include your whole entire ride line, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and put it to the bottom of the deck. Nice pretty removal right there, especially that's a Chronoscommand reference. But if you put a Riddlina, choose one unit that is Riddlina that is grade less than by 1 of that unit and call it. So basically, third skill is a reference of having the Gear Chronicle power. One of them rewinds one of your opponent's rearguards, and the other part is to superior call one card grade less than of your rearguard. Overall, it's not too bad. It gives your tokens extra power, which is actually pretty huge, so you can rush in the early game, but also extra draw power and extra ways of removal, which is also pretty nice, especially since this deck doesn't retire as many tokens as Vindent Flash Rorowa. Although Vindent Flash Rorowa need to run more retire cards anyway. And so that's it for the ride deck. Now for the main deck. So first off, 3 more personas. And then before we go on to the rest of the main deck, you need to talk about this card, the partner of Riddlina, Momoke, which is the Momoke token. So it has the ability to attack from the back row as long as it's in the same column with Riddlina. That's, of course, this is basically her pet dragon on the shoulder, so that's why it's kind of like that. In which the other skill is that act once per turn, you can retire as many rearguards as you wish, and this card gets plus 5k power for each one. So Momoke is basically eating the tokens up for more power. That's why you want to call the tokens so you can power up the Momoke. And if you do not choose to retire all the tokens, they become defensive fodder. That's the point of it. It's basically one of your most important cards of the deck. In which now we continue with the main deck itself. So first off, let's talk about these two at the same time. The Grade 2 Riddlina, along with her evolved form, the Grade 3 Riddlina. Grade 2 Riddlina lets you call a Momoke token if you do not have one by counterblasting 1. Very important because she's going to be basically your main attacker. When she attacks, you can soul blast 1 and then choose one of your Momoke tokens, and then she gets power equal to that Momoke token until the end of that battle. And as you can see from the artwork, she has Momoke on their shoulder. And that's why the Momoke is very important with her as her companion, because the idea is Momoke gets the power, and then she gets even more power with the combination attack with Momoke. And speaking of having a combination of attack of Momoke, that's basically where this one comes in. So first off, at the beginning of your main phase, if you do not have a Momoke token, you call the Momoke token for free. Basically, this has to be existing on rearguard already before you can call that Momoke token. This is going to be very key, especially because of the second skill, where as the glitter skill from hand, at the end of battle that your Riddlina attacks, mainly this one, it could even be this one, you retire the Riddlina unit along with the Momoke token to call this on rearguard, and then it gets power equal to the Momoke token's power. So basically, Momoke token attacks or boosts whatever you want. This one attacks, and then after this one attacks, you superior call this one on top of this one with the Momoke token on top. That's basically the idea, and this is basically a multi-attack engine. Just remember that you can only have one Momoke token on the field, and it has to be on the same column with Riddlina. But it's basically a cool little multi-attack engine, hence why I kind of like this deck a bit, and it's basically the idea of her companion fighting together as one. So it's also the reason why you have to run 4 of each of these, because they're kind of your main partner card of the deck. Now the only thing is, they can also break your hand. So keep this one in mind. You can't always end up having way too many, but you do still want to see them as soon as you can. In which we go to the set order, Resonant Pair of Eyes. As you can tell from the artwork, Riddlina with Rorowa. So, you play it if your Vanguard is Rorowa and you counterblast 1 and retire in a rearguard, aka retire plant token. And then, if it's placed in the order zone, you search your deck for one Riddlina unit and put it in your hand. That, of course, will be very helpful because, of course, you want to search for your Riddlinas. In which there's the second skill where, in the order zone, it's continuous. During your turn while your Vanguard's Rorowa, your back row units get plus 5k. It's usually going to be your tokens, and that itself is going to be pretty nice, especially since they're going to stack. And that will count the Momoke token's power, so if you want to power up your Riddlina skills even more, there you go. And then the Fire Regalis that everyone is looking for, here's the Fire Regalis. So first off, you do not play this at all, and you can only run this as a one copy since the Regalis piece. So you play it from the hand or drop zone by removing the card. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck to choose one card from among them. So, if it's a glitter unit, you put it to your hand, but if it's a non-glitter unit, you call it to rearguard if it's grade less than or equal to your Vanguard. Overall pretty good since it's just an additional search and it's just consistency search for glitter units because this is a glitter deck. And now to the grade 2 lineup other than Riddlina. So first off, let's evolve the Momoke into Shell Breaking Wings Momoke, powered by the Fire Regalis. So first off, you cannot call this, and you can only call it by retiring the Momoke token. And you can call it from hand or drop zone for this skill, which is pretty nice because now it's just discard fodder. In which the second skill where when placed on rearguard during turn, you can retire one of your other rearguards to choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So it's just more removal, which is pretty nice, and that's something that the original Momoke token doesn't have. But the third part is that at the glitter skill for Rorowa, if you have a Riddlina at the same column as this unit, and you do not have another Momoke, you can use this to attack from the back row, and also gets plus 10k power if your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3. So in comparison to original Momoke, the original Momoke needs you to retire your own rear guards for extra power. This card is still treated as a token unit, so keep that one in mind as well. So being at 20k base on its own, without needing to retire, is just very nice. Momoke token can potentially get even more, but you have to retire more rear guards for it to happen. So this in a way is a decent enough of a power up that you do want to see this as soon as you can instead of just retiring your plant tokens, because your plant tokens can become guard fodder instead. And also having the ability to do extra removal. That is something original Momoke doesn't have, so that itself is a pretty nice part. And then I run Icholina, which I might run a 4th copy because from place from hand, if your Vanguard is a glitter unit, look at top 5 cards you deck for 1 glitter unit from among them and put it to your hand and force shuffle your deck. But if you added card, you put this as soul, which is actually fine because you do want to remove some of your rear guards so you have space to call your plant tokens. I might run a 4th copy because of that as well for consistency search, especially since your next spacing is just whatever. So next one is just a whatever card where it's Stokea and Dragon Empire Dual Nation, the Bok Choy. So when you call it from hand other than during battle, you can call plant token and then counter blast 1. Give yourself this ability where all units placed by card ability this turn gets plus 5k, which is going to happen with the plant tokens. Or you choose one of your Vanguards, it gets plus 5k power in the end turn, but plus 10k instead if you have at least 4 units. It can be very helpful, especially to regain another token. Sometimes you'll be retiring your stuff before gain another one. So this can be very helpful as an extra plus, but you don't really need to run this. There's a lot of options you could actually run. And then to Rorowa's new order card, Ever Rising Hope. So you play your Vanguard's Rorowa and you put it to soul. Look at top 7 cards of your deck to choose 1 glitter unit from among them and put it in your hand, of course, shuffle your deck. It's just further consistency search and also another soul charge engine in a way, but it's not completely necessary, I must admit, but it is helpful if you need it. And now to the grade 1 lineup. 4 mushrooms, because putting this to soul even in early game costs you plant tokens. You don't need to worry about the second part of getting 5k power because that requires Grand Fiat. And then finally 4 PGs because PGs. And then for trigger lineup, OT, run whichever one that you prefer. 8 crits for full on pressure. 3 draws, which I am thinking about switching these for fronts, but at the same time you do want to see key pieces, so I do just prefer the draws because I have seen my scenario sometimes needing the key pieces. And 4 heals, 2 being counter heals. And so that's it for this deck profile on my Rorowa deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend and what other changes would you make? So far, I've been liking the deck as it is, although a few cards I don't really use at all, so you can always swap them out and test them out yourself. And once again, no energy cycler because I don't have money to always afford those, so I have different alternatives. But the deck itself still plays kind of similar to the original ones, especially Vinton Flash, which, speaking of Vinton Flash, I am kind of disappointed that it doesn't make use of it. But overall, the deck itself has a better early game plan in comparison to the original. And the artwork is cool, hence why I kind of like this one a little more. But in that, there's really not much to say about it other than basically it's a full-on evolved deck with the lore finally ending with the Ultimate 4. But in that, there's not much to say about this, and see you next time.